Welcome to Under the Hood, the Faculty Position Series. May these tips propel you along your journey. Welcome back, everyone, to part 3 of the Faculty Position Series. And in this part, I'm going to talk to you all about the best practices for the screening interview. So let's jump right in. If you are required to give a screening interview as a result of passing the first 1 or 2 rounds of review from the search committee, this is what you can expect. Okay, so traditionally, back in the day, this would have been a phone call or a conference call with your committee, but nowadays, screening interviews are conducted on Zoom or on Teams, which allows you to potentially use visual aids. The timing of these screening interviews is usually 15 to 30 minutes long, and I don't know of situations where the screening interviews go over this time limit. So generally, these screening interviews have to be kept consistent with all the candidates to meet fairness requirements for job searches. Okay, so since this is a time-sensitive exchange of information, anything that you are going to say during the screening interview needs to be pre-prepared. So please come ready to relay complex technical information succinctly. Okay? You will most likely be provided a prompt from the search committee ahead of time to explain what they will ask of you. So for instance, I have here something that I was asked for one of my screening interviews, and that is to highlight the most important contributions that my plans will have on the research, teaching, and service that I'll conduct at the institution. And so unfortunately for me, this was a 5-minute ask. I think I actually talked for 7 minutes, but I tried to keep it to 5 minutes. So in this case, how you could answer a prompt like this in the time that you're allotted. For instance, if your research is related to the development of novel remote sensing instrumentation, okay? And this is a novelty in your field, you're at the frontier. So to answer the prompt that I just told you, you could actually talk about how that research is actually going to bring new interest to campus. So it's going to attract a different set of students, and you could potentially morph that research area into a new major, a new course, etc. And then perhaps this new research area could bring in new and exciting collaborative grants to your department and institution. Okay? And you'd only know this if you've done the research on fit. So hopefully at this point you've done adequate reconnaissance of the department that you're planning to join, and so you understand how your talents will fill a new niche in your department. Okay, so hopefully you've already done that. Furthermore, this step of the interview process is really about filling in the gaps that your written application just simply cannot fill. All right. So your screening interview gives life to your written materials, and it brings context, okay, to your materials through engaging storytelling, and it helps the committee to find out things that are not obvious or that are actually undetectable in your written application. And I'll talk about this. So for instance, you may have a list of 20 plus publications in your CV, but when you're asked to speak about your previous and your future research, are you able to adequately speak about these ideas, in a technically sound way that makes it obvious that you are the owner of these ideas? Do you speak about these ideas as if you are a third person that's removed from the work? Do you present the ideas as if they are your advisor's work? Okay? Or do you present your research ideas as first person contributions? Okay? Do you frame the work as innovative and forward thinking? Are you excited about your research? Or are you speaking about your research in a way that is dull, unexciting, and indicates that you just did it to do it, and there's really no long-term vision in your plans? Okay, so once again, this interview will bring context to your written materials and will let the committee know how excited you are about the position and about your future research. The next thing I'll talk about is the evaluation of your ability to follow directions. Okay, so if you are given 5 minutes to introduce yourself, do you actually stick to the 5 minutes, give or take 1 or 2 minutes? Or have you rambled during the entire interview period and you left no time for an exchange of information between you and the committee members? Do they barely have any time to ask you questions? Well, if you run across your time, there's no feedback, and you will likely not get a call back because you haven't given them, you haven't followed directions, and you haven't given your committee time to engage with you. All right? Have you come prepared to discuss exactly what the prompt calls for? Or have you veered completely off subject? All right? Have you started, have you taken the interview in a direction that is not talking about your research plans, teaching plans, or service plans? Have you started talking about, how you want to be a department chair one day, how you want to be an administrator one day, how you actually wanted to be a teaching professor? That's completely inappropriate. All right? Just stick to the prompt and talk about what they've asked you to talk about. This leads me to my next point, all right, about following directions. And this screening is actually going to evaluate your ability to handle question and answer. All right, this seems benign, but hearing how you listen to a question, how you respond to that question, has implications for how you will behave in the classroom. Okay? Will you be able to handle these questions from your students, impromptu questions? So are you impatient? Do you listen and let someone finish their question before you start talking? Do you assume? Do you get visibly frustrated when you don't know the answer? And are you able to adequately offer to follow up if you don't know? Do you know how to handle a question when you don't really know the answer? So one of my favorite go-to lines is, that's a great question, and I'm happy to follow up with you at a later date so I can clarify my information. Okay, you can do that in the interview and you can do that in the classroom, but you really don't want to do that in the interview unless you really, really have to. So what that demonstrates is that you have humility, that you know what you don't know, and that you won't balk and make up stuff. Okay, do not make up information in this screening interview that is false. You want to be honest, transparent, and present yourself in the most accurate way as possible. Okay? So the next thing that this interview is going to do is evaluate what are called your soft skills, or things that are related to emotional intelligence and your personability. So your communication style. Do you speak clearly? Do you have adequate command of the official language of the institution? Can people understand you? All right. So over my time as a professor, I've had to slow down my speech. I used to speak too fast, and that has implications for your teaching, your mentoring, and how you communicate to your grad students. Lastly, this part of the interview is going to evaluate your personability. Are you friendly? Okay. Are you a kind individual? Are you arrogant? If I'm on a search committee, I'm actually I take that very seriously, personability, because You will be a person that is interacting with students. And our interactions with students as professors is one that could make or break that student's career. It could drive their morale up or down. It could leave a long-lasting imprint on their experience as an undergraduate or graduate student. So if you if there are things that indicate that you may be a mean professor or an uncooperative colleague, these are things that could potentially be evaluated at the screening interview stage. So now that I've discussed the purpose and the format of the screening interview, I'm going to give you a few of my tips for the best practices to help you have the most successful interview as possible. So number one, time yourself and write a script. So have a prescribed set of things you plan to say and make sure that it is within the time limit that's allotted for you to introduce yourself and to speak. The next thing I recommend you do is that when you're talking about your research plans, make sure that you've included nuanced details that make it clear that it is specific to that department and that institution. All right. You want to make sure that you've been abundantly clear about your vision for how you're going to fit into the department, how you're going to be synergistic, how you're going to work as a collaborative colleague. And you may want to look at the school's mission, the department's mission, to align your lab's mission with that purpose. So if you can draw parallels between the overall mission of the institution and then the mission of your research program, that's a good best practice. The next thing I recommend is to get comfortable with video conferencing and screen sharing. So if you're being screened for a faculty interview, the day of the interview should not be the first time you've ever shared your screen or moderated a Zoom interview. So get your friends together, get your colleagues together to do a dry run with you so that you can be comfortable the day of with the equipment that you plan to use for the interview. You want to appear as if you have mastered online interviewing, online communications, because this has implications for your ability to teach online. Okay, so fortunately or unfortunately for us professors during the pandemic, we've had to become proficient in delivering information online, and it is a learned habit. And if you're not comfortable, you really need to go ahead and get prepared before the screening interview. The next thing I recommend you do is to research your search committee's members. And I say if possible because you may not know who's on the committee. But if you are given a list of names of who's handling your search, go ahead and look them up, know what their expertises are, and so you can kind of predict what type of questions they're going to ask you. So the person on the committee that is most close to your research will handle the technical questions, most likely. And the person that's farthest away from your research may give you the big picture questions about fit and about collaborations and interdisciplinary work, and they may ask you general questions about teaching and service. Okay, know their names, get comfortable with names to faces, and it also shows that you care about community and being personable with your search committee. All right, so that's the beforehand best practices. Now, the interview day best practices are the following. Ask clarifying questions. So, if you've been asked a question by one of your committee members and it's just not sinking in, just politely say, could you please repeat that question? I'm not sure what you're asking. That's okay. Because what that shows is that you care about what's being asked of you and you care about delivering a correct answer or an answer that is in line with what they've asked you. Once again, this has implications for your teaching. All right? So don't let miscommunication lead you to not answering a question that's being asked of you. The next thing I'd recommend is to go ahead and dress business, top and bottom. This will put you in the mindset of an interview, even though you may be giving the interview from home. The next tip is about your setting. Make sure you're in good lighting. So if you don't have access to a window with natural light, use a ring light. If you don't have a ring light, just make sure that you're under a light that's directly on top of you. Please try to get somewhere with reliable internet connection and not a lot of sound. I recommend that you use headphones. I use wireless Bluetooth headphones, or you can use your AirPods. All right. That also eliminates feedback from your mic picking up things that may be coming through your speakers. So that eliminates the audio feedback issues if you use headphones. The next thing I'm going to talk about is really about your being. Please get some rest the night before if you can. Relax. All right. This is when you want to bring in your meditation techniques, your yoga, your prayers, whatever it is you do to relax your body so that you can exude positive energy. All right. When you are introducing yourself to your committee, you want them to feel like you're a person that they're going to want to see every day. All right. Unfortunately, if you are in a sensitive situation at home, just do the best you can. Smile, be personable, because these days you absolutely have to be collegial. Okay. We're in a different climate, and it's important that new faculty are able to get along well with other students, faculty, and administrators, and staff. So that wraps best practices. Finally, I'm going to discuss the use of visual aids in your screening interview. Now, when it comes to visual aids, they may or may not be required. If they haven't told you that you need to bring slides, you can ask the search committee chair or the job contact whether or not you are allowed to bring them. If they say no, just have your slides ready anyway. In the case that an impromptu mention of visual aids during your actual screening interview comes up and your committee's flexible, they'll let you share your screen. Okay? If it's strictly not allowed and you're only meant to give verbal or oral feedback, then don't use the visual aids. But usually you can, even if they're not specifically asked for. So my rule of thumb is to prepare one slide per minute of time that you're allotted to talk. So in my screening interview, I was given a 5-minute introduction, so I had 5 slides. And time yourself accordingly. The next set of information I'm going to talk about is the content of your slides and the distribution of slides for whatever content that you have. If you're given 3 minutes to introduce yourself, have 3 slides, okay? 2 on research, and then 1 that will explain your teaching and service contributions. So what you'll see in the next few points is that you're more heavily weighting research slides compared to everything else, because this is, at the end of the day, a research faculty position. For a 5-minute talk, you'll have 3 slides on research, 1 on teaching and service, and 1 on what I call a 5-year vision. So what's the overall impact, and what major direction do you want to bring to the institution? So this is your big picture vision for where you want to be in 5 years in the institution, right? And if you're given 10 minutes and so forth, you'll have 6 research slides, 1 on teaching itself. You can be more verbose about your teaching goals, the textbook you may want to use, some of the learning objectives. Then you want to have 1 slide on service. You can be more specific and verbose about university service you'd like to do, whether you want to be the faculty mentor for student orgs that you've looked up, right? If there's a specific student org and you've got plans for that, you want to revive it, go ahead and talk about it on the service slide. And do you have any grants that you want to raise for that service? Like, do you have undergraduate research mentoring research funds that you want to apply for? You can talk about that on service as well. Then, if you have 10 minutes, go ahead and dedicate a slide specifically to your contributions to diversity, equity, inclusion. This could include working with affinity groups, submitting proposals that aim to make bridges between PWIs and MSIs. And then finally, you'll wrap up once again with your 5-year vision slide. All right? So finally, something that I tell my mentees when I'm helping them prepare for a faculty interview is this is the time where you can go ahead and brand your lab. Okay? So brand your lab. Give it an identity. And what this includes is a logo, right? You can work with a friend in design, or you can go to Fiverr and hire someone to make a logo for you, or you can go through a paid website that has automatic logo generators. Give your name the lab. All right, start talking about your group and your research program in terms of your brand. So my lab is ACMEL, all right, the Air Quality Modeling Exposure Lab. And so if you've already thought about this, it would be great for you to bring this into your screening interview. And finally, the contact information for your lab. What this implies is that you've set up a website, all right, for yourself at this point. Maybe your lab doesn't exist, but your presence on the internet as an independent research entity or a researcher is established, and you can put the website there, and eventually on certain personal website management softwares, you can actually convert the website to something else and maintain that domain. So the website link will be the same when you transition from independent researcher to managing a lab. So these are the best practices that I have for the visual aids. All right. And this concludes the discussion of the screening interview. If there are other things that you have questions about, feel free to put a comment below. And remember, at this stage, put your best foot forward. Do your favorite workout in the morning. Say your favorite mantras that morning to get your energy up. All right? And leave your committee with a great first impression. Let them know that you're excited about the position, that you're prepared for the question and answer, and you'll have a good outcome. And with that, I'll see you in the next part of the faculty position series.